My name is D'Andrew. I'm a child and youth worker, and I identify as a transgender man. My journey to get to where I am today was definitely not an easy one. To be honest, it won't ever be easy. But I've learned that when you find that little voice that you've been missing and pair that with strength, the end results will be worth it. When you are authentically and unapologetically you. On this journey, I've also learned just how important visibility is, to see people who look like you and who have stories you can relate to. For this reason, I am proud to be sharing a bit of my story here today. I was born here in Canada, but my mom is from Jamaica and my dad from Trinidad and Tobago. I do not have the story where I can tell you that I knew I was transgender from a young age because, well, I didn't. I didn't even know what that term meant. At a very early age, my brothers and I had the race talk, which consisted of how we would be viewed by white folks, how to deal with the stereotypes, and how to deal with the police. But nothing around gender identity or sexual orientation. So I was just known as a tomboy throughout my childhood who played a lot of sports. And I was fine with that. Basketball was my sport. I lived for basketball games. When the weather began to warm up, all the players in the neighborhood would hit the court for back-to-back runs all day long. I was the only girl to hit the court, playing with the older boys. 3-point shots, crossover, step back, pull up, swish. The attention was always on me. And I can't lie, I felt nice. And no one thought anything about it, not even me. I was just known as the tomboy of the neighborhood. In grade 6, a boys' soccer team was formed. There wasn't going to be a girls' team initially, but the coach decided that the girls could try out too. And he asked me personally if I would try out. I ended up being the only girl to make the team. And it felt great. It felt great to make the team because of my abilities, of course, but what felt even better was just feeling like one of the boys. I felt accepted, viewed as a boy, and comfortable with that. But I kept that happiness to myself. In the struggle to understand my identity, sports constantly helped me find some common ground. Basketball especially. It was a game I played to escape everything around me. My grade 8 basketball coach was a Black man who was enriched in Black culture. He knew all his history and was an activist. Me? I just loved the game and wanted to be the very best. Maybe make it to the pros one day. The first girl to make it to the NBA was my dream. I was never interested in his long speeches after practice about loving the skin you're in or being proud of where you came from. All I was interested in was how to perfect my shot, do a wicked crossover, drive to the basket, and finish with a behind-the-back layup. But spending all season with him, I couldn't help but start listening to his stories. I began to learn about my roots and how our history plays a role in the world around us. I also began researching those feelings I had when it came to my gender and sexuality. Things got a little more difficult for me in grade 8. We used to have these long phone chains. You would call someone and they would call someone and so on until you had everyone on the phone. One night, I was not added to the call. I didn't even know the call was happening. The following day when I came to school, no one spoke to me. I had no one to play with at recess. I had no one to eat lunch with. It was a lonely day. At the end of the day, I found out that this phone call was about me. Everyone had decided that I was a lesbian, and because of that, I was someone they couldn't talk to. It was like they were disgusted. I knew right then that whatever feelings I had, whatever questions I had about who I was, those needed to go away, because those thoughts now equaled being hated and alone. High school was confusing as ever. Because of what happened and my internalized homophobia and transphobia, I didn't want to be known as a lesbian again. I dressed as feminine as possible just to fit in. Prom was... I was caked up, tight blue dress, silver sparkly heels, and I was so uncomfortable. Looking back at those photos makes me want to apologize to my younger self for not being honest with myself. College was where I was finally able to start breaking free. It was like a whole new world. There were lesbians everywhere and they had friends. I was extremely happy that I was finally able to let loose and be me. I was able to dress the way I wanted in more masculine clothing. I had a girlfriend and I had friends. I came out to my family as a lesbian. It wasn't easy, but they still accepted me and the girl I was seeing at the time. And basketball was still my safe space. I flourished and even made it to the All-Star game, but something still wasn't right. I hated being referred to as she and her, and I didn't see myself as a female, but I couldn't figure out why. That's when YouTube and Google became my best friends. I would type in what I was feeling and dove into the term that popped up, transgender, and that was it. I would watch different trans men talk about their experiences and their stories, and every time they did, I felt the connection. But I chose not to act on it. What would I tell my family? That I was coming out again, this time as a boy? They had accepted me once, but I was convinced that this would be too much and they would cut me off. So I stayed quiet once again. After graduation, I wanted to make a difference for young people out there. I thought about everything I had been through and how I wish I had one solid person to guide and support me, someone who I could relate to. That's what I wanted to be to youth going through their own struggles. And so I became a child and youth worker. And I worked with countless youth who identified as gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, and a lot of them were also searching to find that little voice. And while I worked with them, many of them found it. But here I was, helping these amazing, brave young people live their lives authentically, and I wasn't. I was still searching for my voice, but I was getting closer to finding it. In 2017, I met my now wife. My career was progressing and things were looking up. I bought a ring and was ready to propose, but I couldn't do that without being honest with her about how I was feeling. That I was not in fact a lesbian, but a transgender man who wanted to start my transition. I was scared. What if I told her and it changed our relationship? But I had to be honest. Sweating profusely, I worked up the courage to tell her. I have never forgotten her response. If that is who you are, be you. Do what makes you happy. It was a response I was not expecting, but it was a response that made me feel safe. The following year, we got married. I was nervous about telling my family, and I wanted them to be at my wedding, so I held off on telling them until afterwards. I ended up writing a letter to my mom, trying my best to explain to her that I was trans. And I ended the letter with, "If you don't ever want to speak to me again, I understand." My family is from the Caribbean and Seventh-day Adventists, and I was prepared for them to disown me. But to my surprise, the response shocked me in the most positive way. My brother was the first one to text me, and he said, "As long as you're not hurting yourself or others, be true to yourself." My mom called me crying and asked how could it be possible for her to never speak to her child again. She told me, "You are my child, and I love you unconditionally, and nothing will ever change that." And although they slip up sometimes when it comes to proper pronouns, they give it their all. My family supports me and loves me like nothing has changed. They asked questions, they worked on educating themselves, and slowly but surely they grew significantly from their old ways. I like to believe that I have wiped homophobia somewhat from my family. I continued my journey by going to therapy and support groups, which helped me deal with a lot of my anxiety and depression and heal before medically transitioning. As my journey continues, I continue to help youth find their little voice and pair it with strength to be themselves no matter what. Today, as an adult, I still find myself going back to 2 of the lessons my grade 8 basketball coach taught me through those long speeches of his. The first lesson he would talk about was asking us this: how can you be a part of the change that you hope to see in the world? And that's a big question. And it can seem overwhelming sometimes with everything going on in the world. Personally, I think it starts with understanding who you are. What are your own values and morals and goals and aspirations? This is not easy. For me, it has been a lifelong journey of research and therapy, patience and determination, finding resources, support systems, and community. But it has been so worth it. And I have made progress in understanding myself. It has helped me to better formulate where I fit into this world and the steps that I can take to do my part in building a more equitable society for the people around me. The second lesson my coach taught us was this: be curious instead of being judgmental. When you are unsure about something, don't be afraid, don't be judgmental, be curious. Google is free. Embrace the discomfort of not knowing. We don't know what we don't know. And every person in this life brings a different story, a different experience, and a different perspective to the table. Listening to stories that are different from our own enriches our lives and helps us build empathy, which I believe is a crucial part of meaningful action as we push towards change and equality for our future. When you are having conversations around gender, race, sexuality, etc., remember to approach those conversations with respect. Being open and willing to listen and learn goes a long way in diffusing potential conflicts before it arises and hold space for meaningful dialogue. If you notice your friend is different, don't stop talking to them out of nowhere. Being different is beautiful, but it can be hard if you don't have support. So if you notice your friend is different, be there for them. Back when everyone stopped talking to me in grade 8, my mom was also very sick on top of that. So sick that I turned down a few basketball scholarships I received that year. So be kind. You never know what someone might be going through, and that could make all the difference. Lastly, I want to bring things back to sports. To anyone who thinks that trans kids shouldn't be allowed to play in a sports league that affirms their gender identity, try to listen and be open to learning instead of just shutting down an idea that's different from your own. Sports were so important to me. I'm still here today quoting my old basketball coach: community, self-confidence, joy, a brief but beautiful escape from my stresses. Sports gave me all of those things, and today they still give kids those things, transgender and cisgender kids alike. Those kids don't choose who they are, but you can choose to be accepting and open to something as simple as letting kids find community, self-confidence, and joy. I'd like to end off with one of my favorite quotes from software engineer Noah Kaplan. Recognize that you don't have all sides to a story or know everything. Be comfortable with the feeling of not understanding or knowing enough yet. Be comfortable with changing your mind. Don't let it hold you back. Let it push you to learn more. In a time of so much division, so much uncertainty, this quote gives me comfort. Change may seem far off and even impossible sometimes, but it is possible. It happens all the time. But it takes people understanding who they are and approaching what is different with curiosity, respect, and kindness. And finally, don't give up on finding your little voice and nurturing it so that you are also able to be authentically and unapologetically you.